Throughout World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union stood as two unshakable pillars of the Allied powers. They never officially opened fire on one another or declared war against each other, except for one bloody autumn day in 1944. An incident so brutal and secret that it was buried in classified archives for decades. There was no confusion about sides, no enemy infiltration. This was a battle in which brothers in arms turned their full force on each other. This is the story of the Niche Incident, the most horrifying aerial clash that signaled the first cracks of the Cold War. On the morning of the 7th of November, 1944, a squadron of 12 heavy Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighters of the United States Army Air Forces tore across the skies of Yugoslavia. Leading the formation was Colonel Clarence Theodore Edwinson. Their mission was part of Operation Ratweek, an effort to sweep and cut off the retreat routes of remaining Nazi German forces from Greece. While scanning for targets, Edwinson spotted a plume of steam rising from below a German armored train. Though not their primary objective, it was too tempting to ignore. Load up, boys.
Load your guns, boys. Let's hit them hard.
Edwinson ordered. The P-38s dove sharply, unleashing a storm of fire that pierced the locomotive's boiler. But the Germans retaliated fiercely. A dense web of flak anti-aircraft fire erupted around the American squadron. One P-38 was hit head-on and burst into flames. The pilot's desperate voice crackled over the radio. "I've been hit. I'm going down." Edwinson frantically looked back, only to see his comrade's aircraft turn into a fireball and slam into the mountainside. No parachute deployed. Rage surged through the American colonel's veins. He swore the Germans would pay. Crossing the Serbian mountains, the terrain suddenly opened into a wide valley with an airfield. Not far away, Edwinson spotted a long column of trucks and tanks moving north. Without the slightest doubt, he assumed these were retreating German forces. There they are. Blue flight, hit the convoy. Red and yellow flights, attack the airfield. But Edwinson made a fatal mistake. Disoriented by equipment issues and weather conditions, his squadron had drifted dozens of miles off course. The forces below were not German. They were the 64th Rifle Corps of the Soviet Red Army. On the ground, the 64th Rifle Corps of the Soviet Red Army was advancing urgently, carrying with it the belief that victory was near. Yet no one could have imagined that, on that seemingly peaceful morning, the fog of war would bring about a catastrophic tragedy, turning allies who shared the same trenches into enemies in a brutal massacre. From above, a deafening roar tore through the sky. The order to attack was given. American Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighters dove like falcons, unleashing a rain of bombs and a storm of bullets that ripped across the ground below. On the surface, Soviet formations were engulfed in flames and thrown into total chaos. Soviet soldiers could not understand why they were being attacked from the air, especially when German air forces in the area had already been nearly wiped out. That tragic bombing run claimed the lives of more than 30 Soviet officers and soldiers, including Lieutenant General Grigory Kotov, the Corps commander. Amid the thunder of explosions and thick clouds of smoke, furious cries rang out, calling for support from a nearby airfield. Immediately, to defend their fallen comrades, Soviet fighter pilots of the 866th Aviation Regiment rushed onto the runway. Yakovlev Yak-3 and Yakovlev Yak-9 fighters bearing the Red Star insignia took off in haste, charging directly into the American formation with burning fury. A fierce and unprecedented dogfight had begun. Over the skies of Nish, The war machines clashed in relentless pursuit. The heavily armed, twin-boom P-38s faced off against the smaller, highly maneuverable Soviet Yak fighters. Tracer rounds carved deadly streaks across the sky, metal collided, and burning aircraft plunged toward the ground. Pilots on both sides fought with exceptional skill and courage, each convinced they were engaging the formidable air force of Nazi Germany. Yet the brutal truth only revealed itself after 15 minutes of combat in close-range pursuits. As the smoke briefly cleared, pilots could finally see their opponents clearly. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. American pilots were horrified to recognize the bright red star insignia on the Yak fighters, while Soviet pilots were equally stunned to see the white star markings of the United States on the P-38S. Desperate shouts filled the radio channels. Cease fire! They're allies! My God, we're firing on our own! The aircraft hastily broke formation, circling awkwardly in the sky, leaving behind a devastated battlefield and overwhelming remorse. The battle ended at a terrible cost. The United States lost several P-38 times along with skilled pilots, while the Soviet side also lost fighter aircraft and dozens of lives on the ground. There were no cheers of victory, only a heavy silence, vacant stares, and the searing pain of realizing that Allied blood had been spilled by Allied hands. The niche incident was later buried in secrecy by both Washington and Moscow to preserve the fragile unity of the Allied bloc against their common enemy. Military officials from both sides quickly exchanged formal apologies and classified the event as a tragic accident. Today, the aerial battle over Niš remains a somber scar in the history of World War II, a harsh reminder that in war, even the smallest miscalculation can cost the lives of many heroes.